Hey everyone, welcome back to theclinicaltrialsguru.com. Again, that website address for you is theclinicaltrialsguru.com. My name is Dan Sfera. I am joined by one of our most popular guests in the history of this program. He's been on the show numerous times. Patrick Stone, who by the way is also a Clinical Trial Guru producer, and we'll give you producers a shout out at the end of this show. Pat is a former FDA auditor. He's a consultant for 2 years now. He just had his second anniversary for consulting. He's doing excellent as far as consulting. People want him to go out there and help them out with whatever it is they need to be done as far as clinical trials, good manufacturing practices, things like that. People respect the expertise of people who have deep industry knowledge, and Pat, who's a former FDA auditor, certainly qualifies. He knows exactly what the FDA is looking for because he was that person, and he can definitely help you out. Pat, hold up your book so people can see it. This is a must-read for anyone in the industry. Bubblegum Badge and FDA History. Just go on Amazon and get it. You can also Google Patrick Stone to get a hold of Pat. He's all over most social networks, if not all. Pat is literally everywhere, so you probably heard of him already. But if you haven't, this will be a good introduction. We're going to be talking about monitoring in clinical research. And there's a lot going on this year, and probably next year, as far as clinical trial activity. I know from my own anecdotal evidence that this is one of the busiest years I've ever seen as far as from a research clinic's perspective. I mean, Pat, we've got tons of stuff. I have no time. None. Like, zero time. My wife hates it. I tell her I'm sorry. This is how the industry goes. There's ups and there's downs, and right now it's raining and it's pouring. So there's tons of work. And I also know, speaking to monitors, again, anecdotal evidence, but probably accurate, monitors are overworked. I interact with maybe dozens of monitors on a weekly basis at my clinics. They are overworked, and we all know what happens when people get overworked. They get tired, overwhelmed, and they start skipping over things that might be important. And the FDA is really looking at this. And there was actually an article somewhere, I think it was on Fierce CRO, one of those websites. They talk about the CRA turnover. And for those of you who don't know, it's the CRA is a monitor, basically. There's a lot of turnover in the industry. Monitors are switching companies constantly because of the workload. And this is increasing this year because of the workload. So what do you have when you have so much monitor transitions and so many overworked monitors is that some data gets overlooked, and the FDA notices this, and I'll let Pat go from here. I mean, what's the main issue that you've been seeing?
So along the lines with being overworked is you have a lot of companies being bought out. You have a lot of conglomeration. You have huge companies, like I believe last year or the year before, you had Kendall being absorbed by INC Research and ParXL and PPD, and these large CROs are gobbling up the smaller ones that are competitors per se. Yes. They kind of want to have an edge on the market. So you have some of that as far as the turnover and the overworking per se, because then when you have a buyout like that, you want to get more for less, and that's never a good patient safety way to do business. Trying to get more with less means, again, cutting corners, doing less of your monitoring. Now, I would say that some of the main issues regarding monitoring is training, what your background is, if you have a scientific background, monitoring will hopefully come fairly easy. or it will be less difficult than and obviously experience is going to have a whole nother aspect. How much experience you have doing the contract research associate work, and right now, what it seems like is when I talk to monitors, they're conducting 8 projects or a minimum of 5 projects, and sometimes they're traveling in between 2 sites in 1 week. So they may be in Jersey for Monday, Tuesday, and then they may be in Minneapolis for Thursday, Friday, and so sometimes they're not always the same project either. It could be that one project they have 3 sites they have to look at, another project they have 1, or another project they have 4. So just getting them on the right day, on the right project, in the right mindset is just a very, very difficult task. So when you change, like let's say you go in a 1 week period, and you go from a cancer study to a herpes study, which are completely different, opposite ends of the spectrum, and then you maybe are reviewing your herpes study with cancer on the mind, or you had an issue with your travel and you didn't make it somewhere, and then your day got shortened. So as travel becomes more difficult, becoming a monitor and doing a monitor's job becomes exponentially more difficult. So these are some of the issues that I've talked with the monitors about, and everyone's different. Everyone's going to have a special case, and everyone's going to have a different workload. But normally when you look at multitasking, and people pride themselves, oh, I'm a great multitasker. Well, to be honest with you, I'm a horrible multitasker because I focus on what I'm doing 100%, and I'm not worried about anything else. And my focus is patient safety. So when I'm looking at a certain clinical trial, I'm looking at it from a patient safety perspective, not a multitasking perspective. And I think the business aspect of being a monitor creeps in every time, to where you're thinking about logistics and multitasking, and people are emailing you, and they're messaging you, and they want this and they want that, and your job is really to focus on the site information and data that you have right in front of you. So a lot of times, I'll go to the sites and I'll talk to the clinic staff. Well, what did the monitor look at when they were here, or what were they focused on? And 9 times out of 10, they're not focused on endpoint efficacy, primary or secondary. They're not queuing in on adverse events. They're not queuing in on concomitant restricted medications. Sometimes they're missing simple facts like you have a PI that is blinded and one that's unblinded. Well, the PI that's blinded is supposed to be looking at the patient after a certain period. Well, they missed the fact that, hey, wait a minute, the blinded guy was supposed to do this, not the unblinded guy.
Right.
So they're just real simple little things that when you're multitasking and when you're flustered and when you should be catching something, you're completely glazing over it and missing it.
Yeah, simple things that are not considered important until they are important. And I was trying to pull up on my phablet here, the Galaxy Note 2. I was trying to pull up that Fierce CRO article regarding the monitor turnover, because due to all this shuffling around and mergers and just monitors being overworked, and these companies are trying to leverage their time, which causes stress and burnout. There's a huge turnover right now, which is very related to missing these little things and not having the necessary training or the ideal training per each protocol that the monitor has. And you mentioned earlier, each monitor on average has about 7 or 8 studies, right? So it's kind of a lot to ask for. And then on top of that, you're getting monitors being moved around or shuffling around in different companies. And that just that just compounds this issue further. Now, from an FDA perspective, how does the FDA look at this? Is it patient safety? Is that the number one area where they focus on this?
Definitely, and again, I believe I mentioned last year that FDA is looking at CROs a lot different now, because instead of to every clinic site, which is mainly how the FDA audits clinical trials, now they can go to the CRO and say, okay, now I want to look at 5 studies, and I'm going to look at them all right now, and I'm going to look at how you monitor them, how you're training your monitors, what you're focusing on during your monitor audits, because it's not just an issue with the monitoring. It's an issue with the clinical trial staff. Patients also come into play, where, let's say the sponsor didn't quite give the patient enough information to understand why they have to come every week, or why they have to take this medication every day, or why they have to do a diary.
Right.
Because again, we can't put it all on the monitor's fault that, hey, they're bad monitors, it's all them. It takes 3 here to really get a clinical trial to its completion. And so the monitor has to help the site understand how to get patient compliance, because clinic sites don't really always understand how to dangle the right carrot for the patient,
right?
For them to understand. Now, a well-informed patient shouldn't really need a whole lot of coaxing or prodding or reminding, but those patients have lives, they have jobs, they have family, and things get in the way. So but from the FDA's perspective, they're definitely going to look at these larger CROs a lot more closely, and they're going to hit them a lot harder because they can get a lot more work done with their review. Just like when you go look at, when the FDA looks at an institutional review board, they look at at least 5 or 6 studies that are ongoing at the time. And vulnerable population studies are some of the key indicators on, are you going to get audited or not? Is the FDA going to come look at your CRO? How many vulnerable population studies are you conducting? And that will let you know that you're a higher risk for an FDA audit, and therefore your training and your systems in place should be ready for that audit.
Yeah, and I'm going to write an article about, there was a lot of issues as far as India and lack of oversight, and a lot of the CROs were blamed for that. And now we're seeing that same thing happen in China, because most of these pharmaceutical companies, in response to the Indian regulations being set up, moved to China. And now we're seeing these kind of issues in China. So I'm going to write an article on that. But it's not just the United States issue. This is a global issue. There's monitors throughout the world conducting these trials and monitoring these trials. And most are under these circumstances of just being asked to do a whole lot and being given a lot of responsibilities. And yes, they are paid well, but it is a lot of responsibilities, a lot of travel. At the end of the day, they are humans also. They're not robots. And you will have mistakes. And we got to make sure that either the monitors are trained a little better, or that the FDA, which they have been doing now with recent guidances, that they release specific guidance, even more specific maybe, as to how monitoring should take place. Do you know anything about any guidance or anything like that as far as the FDA and monitoring?
Well, so in 2007, the FDA drafted some compliance and some talking points for industry. They did not release that until probably 2010 or 11. And basically what that is the guidance for industry computerized systems used in clinical investigations. And so that's really the most up-to-date guidance that the FDA has given. And I think that's a good segue for our next topic.
Yes.
But along those lines, if monitors are provided with tools, whether it's a checklist or an electronic tablet or some sort of device to keep them on track and focus, and that merges with the patient data at the site, I think that would definitely be helpful, because a lot of times the monitors come in and they don't always have a tool or an outline or a formula. You know, they're just going on, okay, we have 12 patients. I stopped looking last time at visit 4, so now I'm going to just continue visit 4 until what you've done now, and they try to do 100%. You know, sometimes they do 50% or 60%, but I think it depends on not only just training, but the tools that are provided to the monitor. I mean, if there's some forward thinking by the CRO company itself or by the sponsor, and these type of tools to key in on are provided to the monitor. I mean, little things like this can really wipe away logistical problems, or, oh, I didn't have a full day at the site, or, oh, I got to go from Timbuktu to Timbuktu 3. So some of these, you know, just with a little bit of upfront forward thinking, some of these issues can be erased. But again, some of them can't. But the FDA is saying, hey, you don't have to be at every site every month. We never told you that you've got to go audit or monitor a clinical site twice a month or every 2 months, or we never gave you a time frame. We just wanted to make, because like there's a big difference between the way a university or a public institution runs a clinical trial as opposed to a private institution.
Of course.
You're going to see a lot less overview or oversight or monitoring from, let's say, a public university, or a let's take Baylor College of Medicine or what have you.
Like an academic institution.
Yeah, an academic type, where the university and the physicians in there are the innovators,
right?
Or even like a NIH study. You know, if it's NIH, they have a lot less monitoring, and what they told FDA is we have about the same amount of deficiencies as a place that has monitoring every month or every 2 months. And it's just all in the way that they deliver it and they execute the monitoring plan. And I gave a talk not too long ago on monitoring, and I brought up a monitoring plan, and one of my listeners was like, "What's a monitoring plan?" And I'm like, "Really? I mean, even if it's a thought out plan, like the monitor's going to go A, B, C, but I would have hoped that most CROs or most sponsors develop a monitoring plan so that the monitors know what's expected of them." I mean, to have that question asked to me by a reputable sponsor, you know, like, what's a monitoring plan, and where does it say you have to have that?
Right.
And I'm like, really? Okay. But it is something that you should have a monitoring plan, and this plan should be followed through. Just like anything you do in business, you have to, you know, have a business plan. You have to business model. You have to execute that plan contractually. It should be spelled out in the contract as well. But if in fact monitors are just being told, okay, here's the study, here's the protocol, here's when I need you to do it, see you later, that is not that. I mean, that is a recipe for disaster.
Right, right.
You know, and something like that. It's like, here, you know, take this and run with it. Do your best you can.
It's definitely an issue, and it will be something that this industry will address going forward as it grows and gets bigger. We are going to segue into our next video, so this one will put an end to it. I do want to thank all of our Clinical Trial Guru producers: Sarah Elizabeth Siegler, Resolve Research Solutions, Accurate Clinical Trials, Erdhart Clinical Trials, PTNR, Patrick Stone himself, Darshan Kulkarni, Biopharm Systems, Zymewire, Mozio, South Coast Clinical Trials, Breakthrough Clinical Trials, and most recently St. Paul Medical Research Center in Miami, Florida. I'm still accepting spots. Only 100. That's it. It will stop. It's lifetime, $99 a year. You get benefits such as me mentioning you in every single video, and also links to your site so that the hundreds of people who visit the site on a daily basis can click on your links and go to your site and learn more about you. Let me know. Dan at theclinicaltrialsguru.com. And Patrick, thanks again, man. And again, if you want to check out Bubblegum Badge, go to Amazon. If you want to learn more about Pat, Google his name. You will find him there. And we will do many more of these because you are by far one of our, I would say, top 3 or top 4, definitely top 5 most popular guests. And I mean, each time you just knock it out of the park with these videos, and people comment, they love it, they retweet it, all that stuff. So thank you, Pat, and we will do our next video right now. Okay?
Thank you to your listeners.